The great chamber of the Galactic Council had seen many tense moments in its 1,000-year history, but nothing quite like this morning. Ambassador Ji-hoon Kim stood at the human delegation podium with the same calm expression he had worn for 3 years of diplomatic service, but something was different today. The usual stack of data tablets, treaty proposals, and compromise documents was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he held only a single, thin folder. Salman Park sat in the trade representative section, her fingers drumming quietly on the polished metal table. She had spent countless hours in this chamber negotiating shipping routes, mineral rights, and technology exchanges that always seemed to favor everyone except humanity. Today, her briefcase contained no new proposals, no counteroffers, no carefully worded requests for reconsideration of the latest trade restrictions. Hyun-woo Lee occupied his usual spot in the military liaison area, but his posture was relaxed, in a way that made several council security officers unconsciously shift in their seats. For 3 years, he had dutifully submitted reports on human defense capabilities, participated in joint training exercises, and accepted limitations on human military expansion that no other species faced. His data pad remained dark and unused. Minji Choi, the cultural attaché who had charmed dozens of alien diplomats with her insights into human art, music, and literature, sat with her hands folded. The council members had grown fond of her presentations about human creativity and innovation, though they always followed up with gentle suggestions about how humans might better integrate their quaint customs with more sophisticated galactic norms. Chancellor Valdris Keth called the session to order with his usual pompous ceremony. The Zentorian leader had overseen the council for 2 decades, guiding it through territorial disputes, trade wars, and first contact protocols with 17 different species. Humanity had been his 18th success story, or so he believed. The young species had been properly integrated into galactic society with minimal fuss, accepting their role as junior partners with admirable grace. We begin today with the monthly Human Compliance Report, Valdris announced, his translator converting his ceremonial tones into the universal trade language. Ambassador Kim, please present your species' progress in implementing the Vorthak mining accords. Ji-hoon stood slowly, opened his folder, and withdrew a single sheet of crystalline paper that caught the chamber's artificial lighting. Chancellor Keith honored council members. I stand before you today not to present a compliance report but to deliver a formal notice. Security Chief Morgan Vell leaned forward from her observation deck. The Krithari had survived 3 galactic conflicts by reading between the lines of diplomatic language, and something in the human's tone triggered her combat instincts. She signaled her guards to subtle alertness. The United Earth government hereby formally withdraws from all treaties, accords, agreements, and cooperative ventures with the Galactic Council and its member species. Ji-hoon continued in the same conversational tone he might use to discuss the weather. Effective immediately, humanity terminates its participation in the Galactic Trade Consortium, the Unified Defense Initiative, the Cultural Exchange Program, and all subsidiary organizations. The chamber erupted. Chancellor Valdris slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor, but the noise continued. Delegate after delegate rose from their seats, shouting in dozens of languages while their translators struggled to keep up. The hegemony representative roared something that translated roughly as an accusation of treaty violation. The Plutonian Collective's spokesman began rapidly calculating the economic implications of losing human shipping contracts. Through it all, the 4 humans remained perfectly calm. Salman Park rose gracefully and approached the central data exchange terminal. With practiced efficiency, she began uploading files that made the chamber's financial displays light up like a festival. These documents contain the formal termination of all trade agreements, the cancellation of all ongoing contracts, and the transfer schedules for returning all council-owned assets currently in human custody. The Zentorian Trade Minister Kellax Moore frantically reviewed the scrolling data. This is impossible. You have binding agreements for the next 50 standard years. The penalty clauses alone would bankrupt your entire species. Soman smiled, politely. If you review subsection 47 alpha of the primary trade accords, you'll find that all human contracts include a species sovereignty clause. Any systematic discrimination against a member species triggers automatic contract nullification without penalty. She gestured to her datapad, where 3 years of carefully documented incidents glowed in neat chronological order. We've been quite thorough in our record-keeping. Hyunwoo Lee stood and began collecting data chips from the shared military database. Each chip contained crucial information about joint defense strategies, weapon specifications, and tactical analyses that the Council had grown dependent upon. Human military advisors had quietly become essential to the Council's security apparatus, their strategic thinking proving unusually effective against threats that had puzzled alien military minds for decades. You cannot simply take classified defense information, Admiral Corvin barked, his forearms gesturing aggressively. We're taking only what belongs to us, Hyunwoo replied calmly. Human strategic analyses, human weapon designs, human tactical innovations. Everything created by human minds remains human property. He paused thoughtfully. Of course, this does include the defensive protocols for stations Gamma through Omega, the improved shield harmonics for the Outer Rim patrol fleet, and the early warning system upgrades for the hegemony border. The military implications hit the Council like a photon torpedo. Without human innovations, their defensive capabilities would revert to pre-contact levels, just as tensions with several aggressive neighbor species were reaching critical points. Minji. Choi approached the cultural database and began methodically downloading files. Her work had contributed significantly to the Council's understanding of dozens of species, including psychological profiles that had prevented 3 potential conflicts through better diplomatic approaches. I'll be taking my research with me, naturally. Research that was funded by Council grants, protested the cultural minister, a floating gas creature whose emotions manifested as color changes in his atmospheric envelope. Research that was conducted by human intelligence on human time, Minji corrected gently. The grants covered expenses, not intellectual property rights. She indicated her nearly full storage device. Fascinating how much one can learn about galactic psychology by simply paying attention during meetings. Chancellor Valdris finally managed to restore order to the chamber. This is clearly a negotiating position, he declared with forced confidence. Humanity seeks better terms, more favorable trade ratios, perhaps expanded territorial allocations. These demands can be discussed through proper channels. Ji-hoon returned to the podium for his final statement. With respect, Chancellor, humanity makes no demands because we no longer require anything the Council provides. He placed his diplomatic credentials on the podium surface. We thank you for 3 years of educational experience. The lessons learned have been invaluable. Educational experience? Security Chief Morgan's translator couldn't quite capture the dangerous edge in her voice. Indeed, Minji interjected cheerfully. We've learned how galactic politics actually work, how each species thinks and reacts, what technologies you possess and lack, how your economies interconnect, and most importantly, how you view species you consider inferior. Her smile never wavered. Quite illuminating. The 4 humans gathered at the chamber's exit. Soman distributed data chips to various council representatives, each containing the technical specifications for transferring or replacing human-maintained systems. These should help with the transition period, she said helpfully. Some of the more complex systems might take a few years to replicate, but we're confident you'll manage eventually. You cannot simply leave. Chancellor Valdris stood, his ceremonial robes billowing dramatically. The galaxy faces threats that require unified response. The Dark Nebula expansion, the Void Walker incursions, the rogue AI collectives. These dangers affect all species. Hyunwoo paused at the threshold. You're absolutely right, Chancellor. The galaxy does face significant threats. He looked directly at the Council leadership. Fortunately, humanity is uniquely positioned to address them. Unfortunately, we no longer trust the Council's judgment regarding appropriate responses. What does that mean? Admiral Corvin demanded. It means, Ji-hoon said softly, that when the next crisis emerges, humanity will handle it our way, according to our values, without committee approval or diplomatic compromise. He straightened his formal jacket. We tried cooperation. We tried integration. We tried being good galactic citizens. The experience taught us that some problems are better solved independently. Minji offered one final observation before they departed. You spent 3 years treating us like promising students who needed guidance and correction. The irony is that you were right about the student-teacher relationship. You just had the roles reversed. The chamber doors closed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving the Galactic Council in stunned silence. 6 months had passed since the humans walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, and Chancellor Valdris Keth was beginning to feel the first cold touches of genuine concern. What had started as confident predictions of humanity's swift return had gradually transformed into increasingly desperate attempts to re-establish contact with Earth. Every communication sent to human space received the same polite but infuriating automated response. Humanity is currently focusing on internal development and requests privacy during this transition period. Please respect our need for independence as we determine our future galactic participation. The message played in perfect counsel, standard delivered in Minji Choi's cheerful voice with the same warm tone she had used when discussing human poetry and music. Somehow, this made it infinitely more unsettling than any angry rejection or hostile threat would have been. Intelligence Director Zentar Prime had built his career on gathering information about every species in known space, but humanity had become a complete void in his carefully maintained databases. His network of informants, surveillance satellites, and monitoring stations reported the same impossible findings. Human space had gone completely silent. Not dead, not destroyed, not conquered by some unknown enemy, just empty of any detectable activity. Show me the shipping reports again, Centaur demanded from his subordinate, a nervous Vorthak analyst whose skin patterns shifted anxiously as he activated the holographic displays. The three-dimensional map of galactic trade routes looked like a spider web with several crucial strands cut away. Red zones marked areas where human shipping vessels had simply stopped appearing. These weren't just minor inconveniences. Human cargo ships had become the backbone of interstellar commerce due to their remarkable speed and efficiency. No other species had managed to replicate their jump drive technology, despite 3 years of supposedly cooperative research projects. The hegemony trade routes report delays of up to 4 standard months, the analyst reported, his spots flickering with stress colors. The Plutonian Collective has had to restructure their entire shipping schedule. The outer rim colonies are experiencing supply shortages because no one else can make the journey economically. Even more puzzling were reports from the 3 human colonies that had existed in Council space. New Geneva, Harmony Station, and the mining complex called Hope's End had been thriving settlements with populations in the hundreds of thousands. Human families had lived there for generations, building lives integrated with the broader galactic community. Now they were ghost towns, not destroyed by war, not evacuated in panic, not struck by plague or natural disaster. The orbital platforms remained in perfect condition, their automated systems continuing to function normally. The hydroponic gardens still grew, the fusion reactors still hummed with power, the artificial gravity generators maintained standard Earth normal conditions. But every single human had simply vanished. Council inspection teams found no signs of struggle, no emergency broadcasts, no indication of hasty departure. Personal belongings remained neatly arranged in homes. Meals sat half-finished on tables, as if families had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. The only clue was a series of identical notes found in each settlement's administrative center. Thank you for the hospitality. The lease has expired. Admiral Corvin had personally led the investigation of Hope's End, bringing his most experienced military analysts to examine what he assumed must be evidence of some sophisticated evacuation technique. What they found defied every known principle of population movement. There are no signs of mass transportation, his chief investigator reported. No evidence of cargo vessels, no traces of industrial-scale packing operations, no wear patterns on the transport platforms that would indicate moving hundreds of thousands of people and their possessions. Then how did they leave? Corvin's forearms gestured in frustration. Sir, that's what makes no sense. According to every scan we've conducted, they didn't leave. The quantum signatures suggest they simply stopped existing in this location and began existing somewhere else. The one remaining human in council space had become the most watched individual in galactic history. Gaian Han continued her anthropological research at the Grand University with the same cheerful dedication she had shown for years, but now every conversation was recorded, every movement tracked, every data access logged by a dozen different intelligence agencies. She seemed completely unaware of the scrutiny, or perhaps simply unconcerned by it. Her daily routine remained unchanged. Morning lectures on comparative xenosociology, afternoon research in the archives, evening discussions with colleagues from various species about the fascinating ways different cultures approached similar problems. Dr. Han. Professor Zilix approached her one afternoon as she reviewed historical documents about first contact protocols. The Centaurian academic had worked with her for 2 years and considered himself something of a friend to the enigmatic human. Perhaps you could help us understand your species' recent decisions. Surely you must have some insight into why humanity has chosen this path. Gaian looked up from her tablet with genuine surprise. Oh, you're still worried about that? How thoughtful of you to be concerned. She returned to her reading with a slight smile. I'm sure everything will work out for the best. Humans are quite good at adapting to new situations. But the economic disruption, the security implications, the breakdown of decades of careful diplomatic progress. Professor, Gaian interrupted gently, I'm just an anthropologist studying how different species react to change. Speaking of which, your reaction has been particularly interesting to document. Would you mind if I asked a few questions about Centaurian anxiety responses for my research? Somehow she always managed to redirect these conversations, leaving her interrogators feeling as if they had learned nothing while revealing far more about themselves than they intended. It was becoming clear that Gaian Han was considerably more than a simple academic researcher, but attempts to investigate her background hit the same information void that surrounded all human activities. The first major infrastructure failure occurred on day 247 of the human silence. The primary defense platform protecting the Forthic homeworld experienced what technicians initially diagnosed as a routine system malfunction. Backup systems engaged automatically, but their efficiency ratings were 60% lower than the primary array. Investigation revealed that the platform's core targeting algorithms had been designed by human contractors, with crucial subroutines that apparently required regular updates from Earth-based servers. Those updates had stopped coming 6 months. Similar failures began cascading across council space. Medical stations found their diagnostic equipment producing increasingly unreliable results as human-designed software modules became outdated. Terraforming projects slowed to a crawl when atmospheric processors began rejecting commands from control systems that could no longer authenticate with human-maintained security protocols. How did this happen? Chancellor Valdris demanded during an emergency economic session. How did we become so dependent on a single species technology? Trade. Minister Kellax Moore consulted his analysis reports with growing dread. The humans were always eager to help. When we mentioned technical challenges, they volunteered solutions. When our systems needed upgrades, they offered improvements. They never demanded exclusive contracts or technology transfers in return. They just wanted to be useful members of the galactic community. And now they've made themselves indispensable. Security Chief Morgan concluded grimly. 3 years of helpful cooperation, and somehow they've woven themselves into the foundation of our infrastructure. The most disturbing discovery came from the Council's own internal systems. Jaewon Seo had been a quiet, dedicated engineer who had worked on facility maintenance and upgrades for the past 2 years. His resignation letter had been polite and professional, thanking the Council for the opportunity to contribute to galactic unity. Only after his departure did technicians realize that he had been responsible for optimizing everything, from life support efficiency to communication relay protocols. The Council's own headquarters began experiencing minor but persistent technical difficulties. Environmental controls fluctuated unpredictably. Communications with distant sectors suffered strange delays. Gravity generators occasionally produced brief variations that left dignitaries floating awkwardly during important meetings. None of these problems were dangerous or destructive, but they created a constant reminder that human expertise had quietly become woven into the most basic functions of galactic civilization. Every minor malfunction raised the same question: what else had the humans touched during their 3 years of enthusiastic cooperation? Dr. Gayon Han submitted her monthly research report as scheduled, a comprehensive analysis of interspecies stress responses in bureaucratic environments. Her writing contained insights into council psychology that were both brilliant and deeply unsettling in their accuracy. She understood exactly how each species would react to crisis, how their decision-making processes worked under pressure, and how their cultural blind spots could be predicted and managed. The first full year of human silence brought consequences that rippled across galactic civilization like waves from a dropped stone. What had begun as minor inconveniences and technical difficulties had evolved into a comprehensive crisis that touched every aspect of council society. Economic analyst Trillian Vec stood before a chamber full of increasingly desperate trade representatives, her crystalline form refracting the harsh emergency lighting that had replaced the usual ceremonial ambiance. The Plutonian collective had built their reputation on precise economic forecasting, but the numbers she presented defied every model they had developed over centuries of galactic commerce. Shipping costs have increased by 412% across all major trade routes, she announced, her voice carrying the mathematical certainty her species was known for. Without human vessels and their unprecedented jump drive efficiency, cargo capacity has decreased by 67%, while transit times have more than doubled. The hegemony trade minister, a massive reptilian creature whose scales had lost their usual lustrous green, shifted uncomfortably in his reinforced chair. Surely other species can fill this gap. The humans were never the only ones capable of interstellar shipping. That assumption proves incorrect, Trillian continued with ruthless precision. Human cargo vessels possessed several unique advantages that no other species has successfully replicated. Their jump drive technology allowed for cargo loads 30% larger than standard, while consuming 40% less fuel. More significantly, their navigation systems could plot courses through space that other species considered too dangerous or too complex. She activated a holographic display showing trade route efficiency, before and after human withdrawal. The difference was staggering. What had been a network of swift, reliable connections had become a slow, expensive web of increasingly unreliable pathways. The Zentorian Mining Consortium reports that rare Earth shipments from the Outer Rim are now economically unfeasible, Trillian added. The journey takes too long and costs too much without human transport technology. Several colonies are already discussing abandonment. Chancellor Valdris felt his confidence cracking like old stone. Temporary adjustments, he insisted. Our engineers will develop alternative solutions. The galaxy managed perfectly well before human contact. Did it? The question came from Dr. Gayon Han, who sat in the public observation area with her ever-present note-taking device. She had been attending these emergency sessions with the same academic interest she brought to everything else, documenting the Council's response to crisis with scholarly detachment. Excuse me? Valdris turned toward the human researcher with barely controlled irritation. I was simply wondering if the galaxy actually managed perfectly well before human contact. Gayon replied with genuine curiosity. According to my research, the 3 decades before first contact were marked by significant economic stagnation, increasing territorial conflicts, and technological development that had essentially plateaued across all major species. Her observation hung in the air like an accusation. The council members had grown so accustomed to the steady improvements that had marked the past 3 years that they had forgotten how different things had been before humanity's arrival. The medical crisis revealed itself gradually, like a slow poison working through galactic society. Dr. Nari Song had been a quiet presence in the Council's Health Research Division, contributing to projects that had revolutionized treatment for several previously incurable conditions. Her departure had seemed like a minor personnel change, but its effects were becoming impossible to ignore. Medical stations across Council space began reporting equipment failures that their technicians couldn't explain or repair. Diagnostic. Machines that had worked flawlessly for years started producing inconsistent results. Surgical robots developed subtle calibration errors that made complex procedures dangerous. Life support systems and hospital facilities experienced random fluctuations that forced medical staff to maintain constant manual oversight. The pattern became clear when Chief Medical Officer Keth Norlin investigated the specifications for the failing equipment. Every malfunctioning device incorporated design improvements that had been suggested by human medical researchers. These modifications had been so effective that they had become standard across the galaxy, but they apparently required regular updates from human-controlled servers to maintain optimal performance. The humans never mentioned these dependencies, Dr. Norlin reported to the Emergency Medical Council. They presented their improvements as permanent upgrades to our existing technology. We had no reason to suspect that they included hidden maintenance requirements. Hidden? Security Chief Morgan's tone carried dangerous implications. Not hidden, Dr. Norlin corrected carefully. The requirements were documented in the technical specifications, but they were described as routine optimization protocols rather than critical dependencies. The difference seemed unimportant when Earth servers were readily available. Similar discoveries emerged from every sector of galactic infrastructure. Energy generation systems across dozens of worlds had been upgraded with human-designed efficiency, improvements that were now slowly degrading without regular software updates. Terraforming projects found their atmospheric processors becoming increasingly unreliable as human-modified environmental algorithms grew outdated. The Council's own facilities suffered from the same systematic deterioration. J1 Seo's improvements to the headquarters' operational systems had seemed like generous contributions to galactic unity. Only now did administrators realize that he had essentially made himself indispensable to their daily operations. Conference rooms experienced random temperature fluctuations. Communication arrays suffered periodic static interference. Even the ceremonial lighting systems had developed an annoying tendency to flicker during important speeches. How extensive is human involvement in our infrastructure? Chancellor Valdris asked during a closed session with only the highest-ranking council members present. Director Zentar consulted his increasingly troublesome analysis reports. Our preliminary investigation suggests that human personnel or technology has touched approximately 78% of critical systems across Council space. They were remarkably helpful during their time with us. Too helpful, Admiral Corvin growled. This level of integration doesn't happen by accident. They were systematically making themselves essential to our operations. While appearing to be eager junior partners grateful for our guidance, Security Chief Morgan added grimly. We thought we were mentoring a promising species. They were conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in galactic history. The revelation that truly shattered the Council's confidence came from their own archives. Dr. Gayan Han submitted her annual research summary, a comprehensive study titled Comparative Analysis of Governmental Decision-Making Under Resource Stress. The document demonstrated an understanding of Council psychology that was both impressive and deeply unsettling. She had accurately predicted every major decision the Council had made during the crisis. Her analysis included detailed profiles of individual Council members, their personal motivations, their species' cultural blind spots, and the political pressures that influenced their choices. Reading her research was like looking into a mirror that reflected not just their actions, but the psychological mechanisms that drove those actions. She's been studying us, Chancellor Valdris realized as he reviewed page after page of uncomfortably accurate observations about his own leadership style. All this time we thought she was documenting human integration into galactic society. She was actually documenting galactic society for human analysis. The implications were staggering. If one human researcher could develop such comprehensive insights into Council operations, what kind of intelligence had humanity been gathering through all their other diplomatic, scientific, and cultural exchanges? Long-range sensor arrays began detecting impossible readings that challenged every assumption about human capabilities. The 3 relocated colonies appeared periodically on deep space monitors, but they were never in the same location twice. Somehow humanity had developed the ability to move entire orbital installations across vast distances with no apparent energy expenditure or technological signatures that Council sensors could identify. Mobile colonies, Admiral Corvin muttered, as he reviewed the latest sensor reports. They're treating massive orbital installations like nomadic settlements, moving them wherever they choose. The technological implications are... He trailed off, unwilling to voice the obvious conclusion. If humans could relocate entire colonies at will, what did that suggest about their military capabilities? What kind of propulsion technology could move such massive structures without leaving detectable energy signatures? And why had they never demonstrated or even hinted at possessing such abilities during their 3 years of cooperation? The Outer Rim monitoring stations reported even more disturbing observations. Human. Exploration vessels were appearing in sectors that should have been impossible to reach, surveying star systems that lay far beyond the edges of known space. 2 years had passed since humanity's polite goodbye, and the Galactic Council was beginning to understand the true scope of their miscalculation. What had started as economic inconvenience and technical difficulties had evolved into an existential crisis that challenged the very foundations of galactic civilization. Chancellor Valdris Keth no longer maintained his confident public demeanor. The Zentorian leader who had once spoke with absolute authority about galactic affairs now spent sleepless nights reviewing intelligence reports that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of human capabilities and intentions. The breakthrough that shattered everyone's remaining illusions came from an unexpected source. Ryujin An had been humanity's scientific advisor to the Council, a soft-spoken researcher who had contributed to dozens of collaborative projects over his 3-year tenure. His departure had seemed unremarkable at the time, just another human, returning to Earth as part of their species' general withdrawal from galactic affairs. Only now did Council researchers discover what Ryujin had actually been doing during his time with them. He wasn't just participating in research projects, reported Dr. Vexlan Korth, the Council's chief science coordinator. He was conducting a comprehensive psychological and technological analysis of every member species. We found his preliminary notes in the shared research database apparently overlooked during the human departure. The notes were terrifying in their thoroughness and accuracy. Ryujin had identified critical weaknesses in Zentorian decision-making under pressure, mapped the social hierarchies that controlled hegemony military responses, and documented the resource dependencies that kept the Plutonian collective cooperative with Council policies. Each species had been studied like a biological specimen, their behavioral patterns catalogued with scientific precision. He understood us better than we understand ourselves, Admiral Corvin admitted as he reviewed the sections dealing with hegemony psychology. Look at this analysis of our combat doctrine. He identified flaws in our strategic thinking that our own military academies missed. Even more unsettling was the realization that Ryujin's observations had been compiled into predictive models. His notes included accurate forecasts of how each species would react to various crisis scenarios, including detailed timelines for the Council's response to humanity's withdrawal. They had been following his predictions almost exactly. He knew we would dismiss their departure as a bluff. Security Chief Morgan read from the files with growing dread. He predicted we would expect them to return within 6 months, desperate for readmission. He even anticipated that we would attempt to use economic pressure and infrastructure failures to force their cooperation. The humans had planned for everything, because they had understood their opponents completely, while the Council had been patting themselves on the back for successfully integrating another species into galactic society. Humanity had been conducting the most sophisticated intelligence operation in known history. Intelligence Director Zentar discovered evidence of the true scope of human exploration activities. Heejin Wu had served as the Council's stellar cartographer for 2 years, contributing to official mapping projects and helping establish new trade routes. Her work had been exemplary, earning commendations for accuracy and innovation. Investigation of her files revealed that she had been using Council resources to conduct unauthorized deep space surveys on a scale that defied imagination. While maintaining her cover as a dedicated employee, She had apparently been mapping unknown regions of the galaxy, far beyond anything the Council had ever attempted to explore. She was using our sensor arrays to conduct surveys that reached into uncharted space, Centaur reported to an emergency intelligence session. The data logs show scanning operations that extended thousands of light years beyond our established borders. Somehow she managed to gather detailed information about star systems that we didn't even know existed. The implications were staggering. Humanity possessed stellar cartography data that made the Council's knowledge of galactic geography look like a child's drawing compared to a professional survey. They knew about resources, habitable worlds, and strategic positions that gave them advantages the Council couldn't even calculate. How many systems did she map? Chancellor Valdris asked, though he dreaded the answer. Based on the data logs we've recovered, conservative estimates suggest approximately 15,000 star systems, Centaur replied quietly. Her surveys covered roughly 40% of this galactic arm, including regions we considered completely unexplored. Military strategist Kravos Than made discoveries that sent panic through the Council's defense establishment. During his investigation of recent infrastructure failures, he realized that every major military installation in Council space had been designed with consulting input from human engineers. What they had assumed was generous cooperation from eager allies had actually been a systematic intelligence-gathering operation. Donghyun Yu had been particularly helpful during the construction of the Outer Rim Defense Network, contributing innovative solutions to complex engineering challenges. His designs had improved the installation's efficiency by 30%, while reducing construction costs significantly. The Council had considered his contributions a perfect example of human ingenuity serving galactic security. Now they understood that Donghyun had been ensuring that every defensive installation had subtle but critical dependencies on human-manufactured components. More disturbing still, his designs included what he had called efficiency protocols that were actually sophisticated backdoors allowing remote monitoring and control of Council military assets. He could have taken control of our entire defense network at any time, Admiral Corvin realized as his technicians worked frantically to isolate and replace the compromised systems. Every base, every weapons platform, every early warning sensor, all of it was accessible to human override codes. Why didn't they use these capabilities when they left? Kravos wondered. Because they didn't need to, Security Chief Morgan answered grimly. They were never threatened by our military capabilities. They were studying them. The most chilling discovery came from the Biological Research Division. Dr. Sung-Jin Oh had been humanity's xenobiologist representative, contributing to health and safety protocols that protected all species during interstellar travel and colonization. His research had been groundbreaking, leading to medical advances that had saved countless lives across dozens of species. His files, recovered from the abandoned human quarters, revealed the true purpose of his research. Sung-Jin had been conducting comprehensive biological and psychological studies of every Council species, documenting not just their physical characteristics, but their fundamental cognitive patterns, emotional triggers, and social vulnerabilities. He knows exactly how to defeat us, Chief Medical Officer Norlin reported to a closed session of the highest-ranking Council members. Not just military defeat, he understands how to manipulate our decision-making processes, how to exploit our cultural blind spots, and how to predict our responses to any given situation. The files included detailed analyses of how each species could be influenced, coerced, or controlled through targeted psychological pressure. Sung-Jin had identified the precise stimuli that would trigger fear responses in Krithari warriors, the social pressures that could paralyze Zentaurian decision-making, and the economic incentives that would override Plutonian logical processes. It's not just military intelligence, Dr. Norlin continued. It's a complete blueprint for psychological warfare on a species level. If humanity wanted to control or destroy any of us, they would know exactly how to do it. Long-range monitoring stations began detecting human activity that defied everything. The Council thought they knew about physics and engineering. The relocated colonies weren't just mobile, they were expanding. New orbital installations appeared around distant stars, each one larger and more sophisticated than anything the Council had ever constructed. They're building an empire, Admiral, Corvin observed as he studied the latest reconnaissance reports. Not expanding into our territory, not challenging our borders, just quietly establishing themselves across uncharted space on a scale that makes our civilization look like a small neighborhood. The energy signatures from human construction projects suggested technologies that shouldn't have been possible. They were apparently manipulating matter and energy on a planetary scale, transforming hostile environments into habitable worlds in timeframes that should have required centuries. Where did they get this technology? Chancellor Valdris demanded during yet another emergency session. Dr. Gayan Han looked up from her note-taking with the same helpful expression she always wore. Oh, you're assuming they got it from somewhere else? How interesting. Why would you think that? Her innocent question contained implications that froze the blood of everyone present. The humans hadn't stolen or borrowed their advanced capabilities. They had developed them independently while maintaining their facade as grateful junior partners in galactic civilization. Council archaeologists, investigating the star systems, humanity had made public discovered ruins that provided the final piece of the puzzle. 3 years and 14 days after humanity's diplomatic withdrawal, the impossible happened. A single ship appeared at the edge of Council space, broadcasting human identification codes that every sensor operator had been hoping to detect for months. But this wasn't the battered vessel of desperate refugees seeking readmission to galactic society. This was something that redefined what the Council thought they knew about spacecraft design. The ship moved through space with fluid grace that violated several fundamental principles of physics. It generated no detectable propulsion signatures, created no gravitational disturbances, and somehow maintained perfect stability while executing maneuvers that should have torn any known hull apart from stress forces. Council sensors couldn't even determine what materials it was constructed from. It's requesting permission to dock, reported Communications Officer Thex Voln, his tentacles quivering with nervous excitement. Standard diplomatic protocols, but the transmission is coming from technologies we don't recognize. Chancellor, Valdris had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, but now that it had arrived, he felt completely unprepared. Grant permission. Alert all security teams but maintain peaceful protocols. We need to appear confident. Confident of what exactly? Security Chief Morgan muttered as she reviewed tactical displays that showed her defensive systems couldn't even properly scan the approaching vessel. Captain Yunseo Kim emerged from the mysterious ship with a small delegation that moved with the casual confidence of people who had never doubted their welcome. She wore a uniform that bore some resemblance to the standard human diplomatic attire, but it incorporated design elements and materials that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Councillor Taehyung Park carried himself with an authority that had been completely absent from previous human representatives. Where Jihoon Kim had been respectful and accommodating, this man projected the quiet certainty of someone who held all the strategic advantages and knew it. Dr. Yoonji Lim accompanied them with recording equipment that looked nothing like standard Council technology. Her instruments were smaller, more elegant, and apparently capable of gathering data that made Council surveillance systems look like primitive mechanical calculators. Chancellor Keth, Captain Kim greeted him with the same polite tone that had characterized all human diplomacy, but now it carried undertones that made seasoned politicians nervous. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We appreciate your patience during our period of internal development. Captain Kim, Valdris replied, fighting to maintain diplomatic composure while his security teams reported that their sensors couldn't penetrate the humans' equipment or even determine how many people were actually in the delegation. The Council is pleased to welcome humanity back to diplomatic discourse. We hope that recent difficulties can be resolved through renewed cooperation. Oh, there have been no difficulties on our end, Dr. Yoonji interjected pleasantly. Our development programs have proceeded exactly according to schedule. We understand that Council space has experienced some technical challenges recently. Most unfortunate, but probably temporary. The casual dismissal of galactic civilization's mounting crisis as temporary technical challenges sent chills through every council member present. Dr. Yoonji's tone suggested that she viewed the collapse of interstellar trade, the failure of defensive systems and the breakdown of medical infrastructure as minor inconveniences rather than catastrophic problems. Dr. Suho Moon stepped forward with a device that looked like crystallized starlight formed into geometric patterns. "We've developed some innovations that might be helpful," he offered with the same generous spirit that had characterized human contributions 3 years earlier. Perhaps a demonstration would be appropriate. Without waiting for permission, he activated the device. The council chamber's lighting systems, which had been suffering from irregular fluctuations for months, suddenly stabilized and brightened to perfect illumination. The atmospheric recycling systems, which had been producing strange odors and temperature variations, began humming with smooth efficiency. Even the gravity generators, which had been creating uncomfortable variations during important meetings, settled into flawless operation. "Just a few minor adjustments," Dr. Moon explained, as council technicians stared at their suddenly perfect diagnostic readings. "We noticed some optimization opportunities in your basic infrastructure design." The demonstration was simultaneously helpful and terrifying. The humans had casually repaired problems that the council's best engineers had been struggling with for months, using handheld technology that operated on principles no one present could understand. Admiral Bowman Kang consulted a data tablet that seemed to be displaying real-time information about something far beyond the chamber. "Our exploration fleets have had quite productive years," she mentioned conversationally. "We've surveyed approximately 47,000 star systems, established preliminary bases in 1,200 locations, and made contact with 63 species that were previously unknown to galactic civilization." The numbers hit the council like physical blows. In 3 years, humanity had explored more territory than the Galactic Council had mapped in 5 centuries. They had apparently been conducting operations on a scale that made the Council's achievements look like tentative steps outside a familiar neighborhood. 63 new species? Intelligence Director Zentar's voice cracked slightly. "How is that possible? Our long-range surveys should have detected any civilizations in adjacent sectors." "Adjacent sectors?" Admiral Kang looked confused. "Oh, we moved far beyond adjacent regions years ago. When you have effective faster-than-light travel, proximity becomes largely irrelevant." She activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with a 3-dimensional map of galactic space. The familiar council territories appeared as a small cluster near the center, surrounded by vast regions marked with human survey codes and exploration routes that extended to the galaxy's outer arms. "This represents our current area of operations," she explained helpfully. "The green markers indicate established human settlements, the blue zones show ongoing exploration projects, and the yellow areas represent regions we've designated for future development." The map showed human presence across roughly 60% of the galaxy. While the Council had been congratulating themselves on managing their small collection of established territories, humanity had been quietly claiming a galactic empire that dwarfed anything in known history. Diplomacy Officer Jiwon Seo stepped forward to address the elephant in the room. "We understand the Council may have concerns about our recent activities. Please be assured that humanity bears no ill will toward any Council species. Our withdrawal from galactic politics was necessary for the completion of our development phase, not a reflection of any diplomatic failures." "Development phase?" Chancellor Valdris managed to ask. "Every species goes through predictable stages of technological and social evolution," cultural analyst Do-Hyun Cho explained as if discussing basic scientific principles. "Humanity needed to complete our transition to a fully spacefaring civilization without the limitations that Council membership would have imposed." The casual reference to limitations carried implications that made every Council member uncomfortable. Humanity had apparently viewed their treaties, trade agreements, and cooperative ventures not as beneficial partnerships, but as restrictions on their natural development. The Council provided guidance and support, Chancellor Valdris protested, weakly. "The Council provided an excellent case study in traditional galactic governance," Councillor Taehyung corrected gently. "Your methods are quite adequate for managing established civilizations that accept static power relationships. However, humanity operates according to different principles." Chancellor Min Jae Shin, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, finally stepped forward to deliver humanity's actual message. Unlike the previous human diplomats who had been polite supplicants seeking approval, she carried herself with the unmistakable authority of someone representing a major galactic power. "The galaxy has changed during humanity's development phase," she announced. "Traditional power structures, established trade networks, and conventional diplomatic relationships are giving way to more dynamic and flexible arrangements. The Council faces a choice: adapt to these new realities or become increasingly irrelevant to galactic affairs." "Are you threatening the Council?" Security Chief Morgan demanded, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. "Threatening?" Minjay looked genuinely puzzled. "Chancellor Shin is simply observing current trends. The 63 species we've contacted have expressed considerable interest in alternatives to traditional Council membership. Several established Council members have also inquired about expanded cooperation with human initiatives." The revelation that Council members were secretly negotiating with humanity struck the leadership like a declaration of war. Their own allies were apparently hedging their bets, preparing to abandon ship if human alternatives proved more attractive than Council membership. "Which species?" Admiral Corvin growled. "That would be confidential diplomatic information," Captain Kim replied smoothly.